All right, everyone. The time is now 6 o'clock, so I will call this session of a joint meeting of the Town Council, the Bridgewater-Raynham School Committee, and the Finance Committee to order. I'll obviously officially open up our meeting. I'll turn it over to the school committee so they can officially open theirs.
So, Ms. King, our chairperson, is on her way.
Okay.
So, as chairman of the school committee, I guess I'll open our meeting. We do have a quorum. Ms. Martelli, Ms. Davenport, myself, Tim Fitzgibbons, our superintendent, Mr. Powers, and I believe I saw Ms. Babalola in the back. Do we have any other folks from the school, Mr. Powers?
I don't believe so, no. I think
Okay,
it's just
so and Ms. Babalola is our business manager, so.
Yep, very
She has all the details that you guys may need. And this is actually a budget subcommittee meeting
Certainly.
of the school committee, not the full.
Not a full committee. Very good. Thank you. And then again, we only have 2 members of finance, so we won't officially open you guys without a quorum. So, not a problem. So, we'll get this meeting started. Obviously, we'll turn it on over to the budget subcommittee to start with their presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions after that. I'll turn it over to Mr. Powers.
All right, thank you, Dr. Perry. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ryan Powers. I'm the superintendent of schools. I know I've formally met some of you via email or others in person, so it's nice to meet you all. I do want to just provide an overview of the FY26 preliminary budget that I presented last week to the school committee and also to the community at large. I know several members of... yes.
Just pull the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
So folks can hear.
Yep.
Thank you.
I know several members of the council were there as well, and I believe you all have a copy of my presentation from last week, so I don't want to, death by PowerPoint and go through every slide again, but certainly just to kind of talk in broad terms, and then happy to answer any questions. Obviously, we are presenting to the towns a significant increase over FY25. This budget was developed with our district administrators, our staff, input from families, input from students, from faculty, from parents, caregivers. It's reflective of everything that we believe we need as a district in order to be a high-performing, highly successful school district that provides positive outcomes for our students. If you look through the budget, and I'm happy to walk through it, there's really nothing in there that is frivolous, that it's something that we don't need, or we're just asking to ask. They are positions that are reflective of our commitment to our kids. They're positions that we've either have lost, especially this past year in FY25. We had to reduce our staff by 24 positions. It's also reflective of bringing back some of the positions that provide some of the highest level care to some of our most vulnerable students, and then providing additional staff. We want to make sure we're always in compliance, especially when we start talking about our students with disabilities, our English language learners. There are federal and local laws and regulations that guide us in how we provide service, what we can provide for service, what we have to provide for service. So first and foremost, we want to make sure we're always compliant. And secondly, we want to make sure that, we are providing the highest level of instruction and care to, like I said, our most vulnerable. And then I think we look overall and look at our overall population. You can see through the presentation that our overall population has grown significantly. It continues to grow. We're, plus 50 even from October 1 to now. That's, the equivalent of 2 additional classrooms that we've welcomed. And certainly, we welcome all of our students that step through our doors. I think our, increasing enrollment, our increasing diverse student population is what makes us special, what makes us unique. And we'll continue to welcome them. But as we welcome more students, that does present a challenge, and we need to make sure that we are keeping pace with staffing. And obviously, when we have tight budget circumstances and we're reducing our workforce by 24 positions, we're not keeping pace. Our overall enrollment is, and we use October 1. October 1, just if you may or may not know, is kind of the official reporting date for the state. That's our first reporting date for the state. So we report the number of students, we report the number of staff, the makeup of our student body, programmatic offerings that we have, and then the state reviews that information and, for lack of better terms, certifies it and publishes it to the public. So October 1 is really the key date for us, especially when we're talking about budgets, because the budget for the following year is based on October 1. So, for example, October 1 of this year is influencing FY26 and so forth. When we look at our October 1 numbers, we're plus 100 from last year. When we go back to the year before, we were plus 100 from the year before that. So when you look at, obviously a 2-year increase of 200 students, however, we're reducing staff, it's hard for us to keep pace and hard for us to really provide that level of instruction and care and quality that our students need and deserve. And so when we put this budget together, we realize it is a significant ask for both towns, but it really is, as I said in the beginning, reflective of what we really need to be that high-performing school district. We're very aware that the state itself has not kept pace with the funding, not just for Bridgewater-Raynham, but for other districts similar to us. There's only so much money that goes into the Chapter 70 education funding program. The way the formula is set up, that certain districts benefit more than others. Again, it's really based on that October 1 enrollment number. Obviously, they factor in how many students you have, but then they also look at the makeup of our students. The makeup of our students, has changed over time. Certainly, even the 10 years that I've been in the district. But when you go back even further, the district looks different. And again, as I stated, that's a positive for us. And with the changing demographics of our district, does come additional dollars in support. But when you go back and look at the last few fiscal years, we were the benefit of significant increase this year. When I say significant, we're up 8+%. When you look at last year, we had only received a little over 1% increase. Compared to the 2 years prior, we were at a 12% increase and an 18% increase in Chapter 70 funding. When you are looking to build your budgets and you're receiving 18% increases, that comes with some danger down the line. And we were very mindful of that. We did not try to add a significant amount of positions. One of the benefits of receiving additional funding from the state is that the burden isn't placed on either town to make up that difference. And so, the last few fiscal years prior to this one, we were able to work within both towns and what they were able to offer us because of that increase in state funding. Unfortunately, going into this past year where we only had a 1.7% increase, that was significant, and it wasn't something that we were able to sustain. Also, given, I realize both towns have their financial challenges and very cognizant and aware of that. But I didn't want to necessarily come to school committee this year without, and then obviously the towns, without asking for everything that I felt as though that we needed to be that high-performing school district and provide our students exactly what they deserve. And so that's why you see a significant increase, almost a 21% increase in our budget overall from last year. And again, I do realize that's a significant ask, and I realize that Bridgewater has established a very strong fiscal cost-sharing model, a revenue-sharing model that has benefited definitely the benefit of the school district and other departments in town. And I know we want to continue to work with the town of Bridgewater as strong partners, something that I've always shared, and I know Mr. Fitzgibbons has shared this as well. When we look at what the state identifies as minimum contribution, so what each town is required to fund the schools with, both towns, Bridgewater and Raynham, always go above and beyond. And so I'll use last year as an example. Minimum contribution was about $44 million. We received from both towns a combined $54 million, so $10 million extra than what was required. We realize that not every city or town operates that way. We do benefit from that. We realize that some cities and towns only get what is required. And so, that is something that we're very appreciative of. And certainly, I think, again, Mr. Fitzgibbons knows, and he even shared at the school committee meeting last week, when you look at, the funding from the towns, percentage-wise, year over year, the commitment has been there by the towns, and we sincerely appreciate that. Unfortunately, because the state funding has been somewhat of a roller coaster, there are years where that burden does get placed back on the towns, and that's where we find ourselves currently. Even though we did benefit from, increase in Chapter 70 and Chapter 71, which is regional transportation, it's certainly not enough to make up for the very small increase that we received last year from the state. And so we are presenting, a budget that's reflective of those challenges. But again, it's roughly, $109 million operating budget. And again, we realize that that's significant. That obviously doesn't factor in capital and debt. That would be additional as well. Obviously, our debt continues to decrease from last year and even from the year before, which is good. Some of our borrowing is coming towards the end of its life, and so obviously those costs are lower, even with the new school project, coming online the last couple of years. And then obviously capital, I know the town has made a strong commitment, as has Raynham, to fund a lot of our capital projects. Just like with the town, we have needs. We obviously operate 7 school buildings. Those buildings have, served us well, but some of them are aging and need some, tender loving care. And our acting director of facilities is doing a great job putting in preventative maintenance in all those buildings to ensure their life expectancy is as long as possible. But also, just like the town, during the winter seasons, we're obviously reacting a lot to heating issues. But just like at home, those are very expensive. When you have to have your furnace fixed or boiler fixed, you can imagine what a furnace at home costs versus what a furnace or a boiler at a school costs. So those costs are driving us up. I think some of our biggest challenges that we're finding is that, we do have some serious cost drivers that essentially, equate to almost $10 million. Obviously, we have some, good services, general expenses that obviously those costs increase on an annual basis. But we look at, some of those bigger cost drivers like transportation. Obviously, where we provide transportation to students that live 1.5 miles from their home, we are reimbursed through Chapter 70 for some of those transportation costs. We don't receive. I'm sorry, 71. Thank you. We don't receive transportation reimbursement for field trips, athletics. It really is just a transportation to and from school. In addition to that, we are responsible for transporting any of our students with disabilities that require transportation to and from, and that is both in district and out of district. So our students that attend Bridgewater-Raynham schools but require transportation, we do provide that. And obviously, I'm sure you've seen Bridgewater-Raynham vans around the community. That's the main mode of transportation for some of our students with disabilities. Others are able to ride the school bus, but those that require it, a van in district versus a van out of district, those costs are very significant. When we look at transporting a student out of district, because we don't have the educational programming or the student's need is so significant, they require out of district placement. Depending on where that student's going and how far, it could be about $100,000 per student just for transportation. That doesn't factor in the cost of their tuition to some of these out of district placements. Again, depending on where they're going, depending on their need, that could also be about $100,000 for just a day placement. And then obviously we have some students that require such significant care that they attend residential facilities. Those can be anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 plus or minus. And what we really try to do with our special education costs, including transportation, is to always kind of build in some contingencies there, because we know when we look at our current enrollment, we obviously do somewhat of a needs assessment and look and say, okay, is there anybody potentially on the horizon maybe next year that might need an out-of-district placement? And so we try to build some contingencies in for that, as well as not just tuition, but also transportation. But sometimes we can't plan for that because we have students and families that move into the district and they come with significant needs, and then that cost is something that we have to absorb. When we look at the number of, we've had significant move-ins already from the beginning of this school year that are requiring out-of-district placements. We have one residential placement that is taking place now. So those are cost drivers that we can't always anticipate. And obviously, when we start to look at those expenses, how can we absorb those for this year? We also have to build them in for next year. And so that is where, you do see a significant cost increase to our special education transportation and just general special education cost tuitions. Utilities, much like I'm sure the town is dealing with, we have all new utility rates. All of our utility contracts had expired within the last year, and so those all had to be renegotiated. But unfortunately, those rates have gone up. We were in a multi-year contracts before, so we were able to reap the benefits of multi-year contracts, keeping those costs low. But those have gone up as well. And then I think, again, not unique to Bridgewater-Raynham, but the cost of health insurance is going up. You probably feel that at home, but also maybe in your professions, but certainly here at the town as well. And so those are significant cost drivers for us, in addition to just our everyday expenses that, we see an increase. The price of paper obviously goes up every year. It's something we're able to keep pace with, but certainly not some of those other significant cost drivers. So when we look at those cost drivers, plus adding additional positions, we really, what we're proposing in this FY26 preliminary budget is to restore those 24 positions that we lost from FY24, and then we start to look at positions that we'd like to, add on to our staff in those positions, and you have them in the presentation, and you can see a lot of those positions are not new requests. Those positions are positions that have either previously been requested or in some cases had been eliminated prior. And in some years when we look at some of those positions, they've been requested for multiple years, but just unfortunately we have not been able to bring those positions on. I think what it shows is that we're not every year changing our ask. We're saying and we're committing to these are the positions we need, and obviously the positions that our students deserve. We're also looking at, again, I mentioned our students with disabilities, our English language learners, making sure that, we have enough staff to provide. Those numbers continue to grow. And then we also look at our overall class size. Our class size on the Bridgewater side is approximately 28. On the Raynham side, it's approximately 26. When we look at K-8, high school is a little bit different, obviously, because you start to look into electives. And so, you may not have as many students decide to take a certain elective. So there could be, 12, 13, 14, 15 students in an elective. Certainly that skews the numbers when we try to look at overall class size. When we look at our general core classes at the high school, though, those are very reflective of our other grade levels, 25 to 30, 30 plus in some of those classes. So again, it's not really just a K-8 issue. It really is K-12 plus. But obviously, we also know there's a strong benefit to having lower class size, especially at our lower grade levels. And that's something that I don't think anybody would argue against, but obviously when we add positions, those come with a cost. I did in this budget propose 14 additional, what I refer to as class size reduction positions. So looking at, and obviously these are all based on projections as of today. And as I shared with you already from October 1 to now, we're plus 50. I'm not sure what our overall enrollment will look like from now until the end of the year. And so when we look at class size, we're just going based on projections by moving current grade levels up a grade and looking at staffing. Those numbers could certainly change between now and then, and obviously our projections could potentially go up or down. But when we look at lowering class size, we're looking at next year's numbers, as I said, moving our students up compared to what we have for staffing. Now, certainly if we're able to restore those positions, some of those positions that we lost going into this year, that will help with class size. There were several classroom positions, so by default, by bringing those positions back, it will help lower it. Not significantly, when we're talking an average of 28, when you add one teacher in a grade level, say for Bridgewater, for example, we have approximately 10 teachers per grade level. When you add one teacher, it has an impact, and I'm never going to say that, you lower by 2-3 students, that's not a significant impact. But it's not as though that we go from 28 down to 20. That would be obviously a significant ask to reduce. But this budget is reflective of trying to get us down into the low 20s where possible. Mid 20s, I think, is what we would say is acceptable. And I think anything as we get higher, 30s plus, it just, that's not an ideal learning environment. I will say, in some cases, we may still continue to have class sizes of 30, say at the high school, because we have certain electives that are very much desired, so they are filled and sometimes over-enrolled because our students really want to take those electives. But I think overall what we want to try to do is lower class size, K-8, lower class size at the high school. This budget is also reflective of adding additional positions at the high school. So when we look at, adding 14 class size reduction positions at K-8 level, the high school is also requesting 14 additional positions. Again, positions that were either eliminated in FY25, not filled because of retirements, or positions that we've been asking for several years now. So again, a significant ask at the high school level, but I think when you look at our elective offerings, such as music and art, we only, for high school, 1,400, almost 1,500 students, we have one art teacher, one music teacher. There are neighboring districts that are half our size that have twice as many music and art and PE staff. And so again, it's something that we recognize. Those class sizes are large because students want to take those electives. The art they produce, the music they produce is second to none, and it's awesome to be part of that and have that faculty as part of our staff. But we know, our students could certainly could certainly utilize more staff. Obviously, we, looking at other areas of the district as well, our facilities department, looking to restore 2 custodial positions that were eliminated and adding another facilities position to our staff as well. Obviously, I think you can appreciate that we want to make sure that we have clean, welcoming environments for our students and staff. And when we don't have, all the maintenance staff we need, that starts to suffer. And then we do have a couple central office positions that we are looking to restore that were not filled for this year. One is in the business office, an administrative assistant, and one is in the special education office, another administrative assistant. Both of those individuals had retired, and we did not fill those, but they play a critical need. As I've shared with you some of our challenges with our special education department with compliance, we want to make sure that our staff is supported. There's a lot of paperwork associated with that department, and so having that support to our staff is key. And then looking at support for our business office, we had 2 positions in our payroll office, and now we're down to 1. Thankfully, our payroll manager is phenomenal, and she does a great job. But reducing in that area, raises concerns for me. We haven't, had any significant issues, but I think you can all appreciate, if there were payroll issues in your own profession, what challenges that would present. So looking to, get that position back as well. Again, a significant ask. We know that across the district. We are very aware of that. But again, I think hopefully you can understand the positions I just outlined to you. There are no positions that are not truly needed for us and for our students. And so that's the kind of the budget as an overview. I'm happy to answer any questions, dive into some of these slides. You can see the flow of the presentation just gives some history, context of the district, student enrollment. There's some budget information going back a few fiscal years, so you can see in terms of funding from not just the state but also from the towns. And again, thank you for your support. And then really what I tried to do is break it down by the different categories that we build our budget upon, series that we refer to them as. And so obviously like instructional support, facilities and maintenance, those types of areas. And so I've broken it down by those categories to show you what last year's approved budget was, what we're asking for this year. You'll see the difference, and then a short explanation as to what some of those cost drivers are and what makes up that difference. But again, you have all that information. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or certainly provide, additional information as the budget season unfolds.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. I just actually ask any other members of the subcommittee if you have any comments that you'd like to make on top of what Mr. Powers has said.
If I may.
Sure,
Rachel
please.
King. Rachel King, Budget Subcommittee Chair. Sorry, I was running in at the last minute work.
No worries.
Of all days, was running late. I just want to reiterate, I know Mr. Powers gave a lot of information. We're really trying to advocate for our students and our staff, what we need this year. I know we're at least half of your town budget. That's a huge portion of your budget, but it's an important part of your budget. Having a high-quality school system is important to the town. And right now, we are not giving the students everything that they need. They're not getting the special education things that they need. The classroom teachers don't have the supports to give all of those students what they need to be successful. They're doing their best, and I know our staff, all of them are, but with class size high, special education needs rising, and our staff levels not growing, one of his slides, the one that is most jarring to me, the enrollment and staffing. 10 years ago, 2014 to 2015, our student population was 5,301. We're 300 more students currently, but our staffing level has only risen 5. We're not keeping pace, and our high needs has nearly doubled. So we're not keeping pace with the needs of the district right now with what we have. And if you go through position by position that we're asking for, all of those are necessary. We need special education teachers, we need classroom teachers, we need interventionists, we need the support so we can have a high-quality district. So it's really important this year that we advocate for what we think that we need to be the best school district that we can.
Thank you very much. Mr.
Dr.
Gibbons.
Perry, thank you. These guys know all the details. I'm more of a big picture person, sorry, but to open the door next year, to keep the same level of staffing, to turn on the lights, to heat the buildings, et cetera, to get a 4% increase roughly from the two towns and the 8% increase from the state. And unfortunately, unlike the town where you've got about maybe not five, maybe a little bit more, but no more than 10% of your revenue coming from the state as aid, we've got 30% basically. So we're very much at the whim of the state. And as Mr. Powers said, the towns have funded us. I said it the other night. The towns have funded us at a rate of about 4% increase a year since 07-08. State has funded us at 2.3%. So figure out where the problem is. It's not the towns. That said, we still have a problem. And to open the doors next year without laying people off is going to cost $2.7 million more than what our state aid and what we expect from the two towns doing nothing would do, okay? To get back to where we were before 24, the 23-24 year, it's an even bigger number. You heard the superintendent say we lost 24 positions. Well, just to bring those back, obviously, that's more. That's more, and so on. And then, I don't know if any of you have heard, but the parents really are interested in class sizes now. So to help bring those down, you got even more. So that's where all the money is going to, essentially. I mean, we can nitpick at little items here and there, but in the big picture, that's where we are. We're here to at least fund opening the doors next year without cutting people, get back to where we were before we had to cut people, and then reduce class sizes somehow. So that's what really drives the whole budget. So those are just my comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
And to open it up
Fitzgibbons.
so you
Sure.
guys-
What I might suggest before we open up to the council comments, I know town manager has kind of a preliminary budget message that was submitted out to the council and stuff, so maybe I'll turn it over to the town manager and the finance department to kind of give an overview of what we're looking at with FY '26 and where the town stands, and then we'll open it up to questions from council members, and if finance has any comments, we can get you guys as well.
Thank you, President Perry. So yes, you do have our preliminary budget as of February 1st, which is required by the charter. And that budget does include the just under a 4% increase that Mr. Powers spoke about. With that, and what the town can expect in what it can raise under Proposition 2.5 and the state aid we know about, and the costs that we know about. And I want to make sure everyone understands we don't know all of our costs just yet. Some of them we're still waiting to confirm. That has our budget under balanced or out of balance by just about $1.3 million. We feel that we can work towards closing that as we get towards the May date of approving the budget. But I will have to be honest with you to say that the ability to increase it to meet what the school needs will be difficult. And I applaud them for telling us what they do need. I think that's very important because a high-functioning school system is critical to a community. But I think it's also important for everyone to understand that because of the limits of what we can raise and the fact that about 53% of our budget as planned would be for schools and the balance for the town, of that remaining 47%, only 29% of it is actually money that we can affect a change, and it's almost all in salaries. Most of what we do, we don't buy many things. Public Works is probably the department we buy the most items for road work or things like that. So it's generally people. And so if we were to meet really the $10 million increase, which gets you the $115 million budget, we would have to cut 30% across the board. Police, fire, public works. Think about the hours at the library, think about the senior center. It would have to be across the board because there's some things we can't not do. We have to have an accountant. We have to unfortunately issue tax bills and things that we're just required to do as a local government. And so it would be a significant service cuts on the town side of the budget because while we have built up reserves over the last 10 or so years, we're at a place where we have what's appropriate for a community our size, but if we were to touch them, we would put ourselves in a fiscal situation that would also be difficult. So this is a difficult situation. I think we need to work through together. I'm confident that we can. I can get into many more details, but I think if we're going to have a high level here, I'll stop there.
As an overview, I think
Yeah.
that's good.
Harry, could I just echo what the town managers have said, because I agree 1,000%. And I said it the other night at our school committee meeting when the superintendent gave his first presentation of the preliminary budget. Too long, we've asked the police, the fire, the DPW, the schools to do more with less. We have to try to do more with more. And the only folks who can decide to make that happen is the town council and the voters in the town meeting of Raynham as to what they want to do. I'm not advocating, I don't believe any member of the school committee would advocate for taking money away 30% from police and fire. No, we need our police and firefighters as a school district, right? Let's do more with more. Let's not try to do more with less and fight about a pie that's this big. Let's try to make the pie a little bigger. But only you guys can decide if you want to do that. So.
Thank you, Mrs.
Just one
Gibbons.
more fact I think would be helpful for people to get a general understanding of what, let's call it $1 million. What's $1 million mean to the average taxpayer today? It would be about $100 a year. A little more, a little less. If your house is worth more, it's worth more. Less, it's less. But generally, $100, right, per $1 million. So if both towns were able to go forward and ask for perhaps an override to pay for it and ask for the whole $10 million, that would be about $1,000, $1,100 on the average house. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just trying to help people understand what it means in real dollars to real people.
That's correct.
So,
Yeah. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay, so I will actually then open it up to questions from any town council members, if we want to direct it to either, whoever you'd like to address it to. So, Ms. McGrath, if you'd like
Thank you,
to
Mr.
start.
President. I have been concerned about the school since I've been a town council. So I was wondering, you said you have 30 kids in a class. What is the fire code capacity for classrooms?
So obviously, it's going to vary by building in terms of fire code. Some of our classrooms are much bigger than others, so it's not really an issue. Although 30 is significant, all of our buildings are inspected every year. The fire department does do a walk with the town inspectors as well. So we've never been in a situation where, even though the desks are laid out, they can see that there's going to be 30 plus, that any concerns have been raised in terms of compliance with fire code issues.
Okay, so you say we have 27.8 low-income students. Do we have homeless students?
We do. We have a number of students. We have a mix of students that part of the state emergency shelter program, and then we have students that their economic situation may have changed. They may not necessarily be part of a shelter or living in a shelter. They could be doubled up with other family members, but obviously they may be considered to be homeless. And obviously, we have an obligation to those students. When a student is considered to be homeless, they have a right to, stay here at school, or a right to enroll right away in school if they move into town. And then, obviously, depending on, transportation, if it's, outside the district, we have a responsibility to provide that transportation as well. So there are costs associated with that.
Yeah.
We do receive some reimbursement from the state as well, so it's not a true 100% cost to the district. Obviously, we're getting that as reimbursement, so we certainly need to put that money out up front for those costs.
So does the school reach out to nonprofits to help the families?
Yes, we actually have a coordinator of family and student supports. So she kind of wears many hats. She's what probably at one time we knew as our attendance officer. So she serves that function. But we also realize that our students and families had additional needs, and it's not just about being in school. It's making sure that you have proper clothing and you're resourced, and that you're not going without in terms of your basic needs. So we do. She works with several nonprofits, especially around the holiday times, winter time, to make sure that families are resourced if they have food insecurities or needs, or same thing with clothing as well. And then she even tries to connect them with different types of programs for offsetting utilities and those costs as well.
That's good. So I got the town manager's budget a little ahead of time, so I was thinking how we could help in a different way. And a lot of the teachers spoke how everything starts in the classroom. So looking at the different positions that you guys need, the ESP, EL, intervention, and all that, I was looking at the BSU, and I was wondering if we could hire interns there, because, they have masters in clinical psychology, masters in social workers, teachers degree and such. Do you think we could reach out to them if you're not getting enough teachers?
So that's a great suggestion, and thankfully we have a very strong partnership with Bridgewater State, and so we have reaped that benefit of having student teachers, students that come in to do their pre-practicum observation hours that are allowed to, assist students and assist the teachers. We actually had 2 of our professors reach out to us last year, and they had 2 of their classes, instead of actually meeting on campus, learning more of the theory behind teaching and learning, they said we'd rather have them be immersed in classrooms. And so instead of meeting on campus, they actually had their students come out twice a week for a couple hours on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And so that was, a great benefit. It obviously provided some additional support to the students and the staff. So we would certainly explore all those options. And then I know our Human Resources Department kind of helps facilitate the student teachers and student interns with Bridgewater State, and they're in constant contact about that as well.
Yeah, maybe we could work out with the president and, if you're not meeting and you got 24 already short, maybe we could help out with that way. Also, we have a veterans volunteer program, and I don't know if the high school and other schools are considered where they could work in there. You said you have custodians and stuff like that. Maybe they could work there for volunteers. If that program works for, I know if they work in the town hall, I'm just wondering if the program would work in the schools also. So we'll have to check out with that. And the last question, the position for the nurse, is that in the Bridgewater schools?
So right now, we actually have a need. Again, what we're seeing overall is that we're having a significant need of the students that are moving in. In some cases, we've had 2 students that have gone to out-of-district placements because we didn't have the nursing staff in district to support that student or those students. But unfortunately, because their needs are so significant, we had to share the cost of adding additional nursing staff in the out-of-district placements. And so really looking at some of those potentials. Obviously, our nursing staff is at a minimum, and so when we have a nurse out, we don't always necessarily, we have to sometimes pull staff from other buildings. And so certainly that position may be assigned to a Bridgewater building, but I think it's really going to kind of evolve as the springtime goes on and really look at the need of the students where they are.
Well, maybe we could help because we have a vacancy for a health professional for our Board of Health, so maybe we could combine what we need with what you guys need then. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going, Ms. Strigels.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hello.
Hello.
My question centers around classroom morale. And I'm a graduate of Bridgewater-Raynham, as are so many people in this room. And there are many a familiar face of people whose children I love that are sitting in the audience right now. And I've heard countless stories of the bullying that's happening in our schools and a lack of awareness on how we can mentally deal with it, both on the teacher front and the student front as well. How has the overall class sizes contributed to a lack of morale and us not being able to actually successfully implement our zero tolerance policy that I know BR has had for quite some time?
So I can speak on the first part to start around class size and morale. I think high class size in Bridgewater-Raynham is not really a new issue. Certainly as we have more students moving in, we have higher class size. But when you go back and look at the last few years, our classes have been high. And so it's not, we're not coming to you to say, hey, we were at 22, now we're at 28, when you look historically. I think what and this is, a testament to them, our amazing faculty and staff, that's kind of become their norm. And they've, in some ways, I use the term accepted, like they know, unfortunately, class size is going to be high. And so certainly, I think it has, I'm not going to say it doesn't have a negative impact. It certainly, puts a lot of pressure on everybody within the class, the students and the staff. I think, as much as I hear from our staff that, yes, they would certainly advocate for lower class size, I can confidently say it's never put their professionalism in a compromising position. They show up every day to work. If you see them interact, whether it's 26 or 30 students, they interact with them the same, a smile on their face, creating those warm, welcoming environments. And, they're using the district resources that we've provided to them to try to provide that highest quality of education. But we know that, as we add more students to their class, that becomes challenging to do. But it's not a challenge that they're not, that they don't take on every day and take on with a sense of pride. And I think, obviously being a graduate, hopefully you have that sense of pride of Bridgewater-Raynham as well, and you had a good experience. And that's what we want for our kids, and I think for all of our educators in our room, but across the district, that's exactly what they want. And, again, I know I ask a lot of them. They always respond to everything that I ask them to do. And if I ask them to educate 28 students, they're going to do that to the best of their abilities. If it's 30, to the best of their abilities. But we all recognize that that's not necessarily the ideal learning environment. And so what can we do then to provide lower class size so that they can, they get to every student now, but can they get to every student on a deeper level and make sure that every student is getting exactly what he or she needs? And so that's really what brings us here with this number. In terms of bullying, certainly, we have a very strong stance on bullying. It's not something that we would ever allow or tolerate. I don't ever want to stand in front of you or sit in front of you and say that it doesn't happen. If it does happen and we're made aware of it, we do respond, we investigate, and to make sure that supportive measures have been put in place and that action ceases. Certainly, again, I would never say that we haven't run into situations where there may be a continuation of that. But again, working with families, I always encourage families to reach out to their, first teacher, but obviously building administrator, then certainly myself or other central office administrators. Sometimes we don't know about it. You might hear about it, or others in the community might hear about it. Somebody might share it, with a friend or via social media. And then, it may be shared with me. When we look into it, we've never actually heard from that parent. And so I would just say it's so important for families, community members to reach out if they are hearing those things, because we 100% want to address that. It's not something that we want to allow to ever happen, because it's not, one, it's just not right. But two, it's not what our students, deserve. And we want our students to come to school every day feeling safe and supportive, and, that they are part of our school community, but a school community that's a positive environment as well.
Dr. Perry,
Yes.
could I just follow up on that one?
Certainly, go ahead.
And this is about class size, Ms. Striggles. The superintendent portrayed a great picture of our staff, and they are a great staff. But when you come into work every day with 28, 29, 30, 32 kids in your class every day, 180 days a year, it's going to wear you down. It's going to wear you down, okay? It's a lot different than if you had 25. Our staff does a great job in dealing with that. However, it's important, the school committee has made it abundantly clear in many, many meetings that class size is a very important issue to us. The key thing is, how do you fund it? How do you get the teachers there? And, I can't say enough good things about the staff in dealing with that class size. But I do think maybe sometimes it contributes to a little burnout. And maybe somebody decides, you know what, I'm going to go to this district because I know it's going to be a better quality of teaching experience, even though it might be a little less pay. I don't know, but we do have to acknowledge that and just say that, yes, in fact, they do a great job, but they ought to have to do it, I guess.
Thank you, Mrs. Gibbons. All set, Ms. Striggles. Mr. Lindy.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Powers, for a really good presentation that I attended the other night, and all the information that you've provided. It's a tough job because, unfortunately, our state isn't providing the resources that we need. I'm confident, Tim expressed some confidence, I'm confident that we could get some more money from the state because we have a new rep that is going to look to help us, that was a member of this council, okay? I'm confident we can all work together as long as everybody stays calm and figures out a way to do it. Now, recently, 3 of us from the council attended the Mass Municipal Association conference, and we all decided, we kind of split up and went to different workshops, except for one. We went to the workshop on debt exclusions and overrides, okay? And we have some information that we're going to bring back and share with the council and share with everybody else. Not fun to deal with overrides. Debt exclusions, we've already done a few in this town. I've lived through that in my life. My philosophy is that every generation is kind of responsible for paying for the next generation. When I went to elementary school, I went to a 2-year new school, and I switched to an 80-year-old school. Then I went to a 21-year junior high and a 4-year-old high school in Brockton. Brockton got hit really hard under 2.5. They lost 600 positions. My mother was one of them. I watched from afar, living in Brockton, what happened to this town before when it was the schools versus the police and fire. And I don't know if Tim was on the council then or not, but that's not a pretty sight to behold. Listening to Blythe talk about a 30% across the board, well, a 30% across the board cut would kill off the library, would kill off the senior center, would kill off other stuff that we need too. Tim's statement about doing more with less, the one group we do need to think about are the seniors that are on fixed incomes that live in their houses here in town that maybe $100 doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. So we're going to have to really educate. What I heard also at that meeting was the town of Mansfield did something very interesting during the budget process. The town manager led the discussion, and he had the finance committee. They have a select board, so it was a select board, superintendent of schools, and they have their finance committee was the advisory committee. Everyone got together and formed a little subgroup. All the stuff is on the town website. It's totally 100% transparent, so everybody can see everything. And they got into the process with a debt exclusion. Town of Foxborough, they're going to post that back up on the website because they had taken it down. The city of Medford, they all managed to do different debt exclusions, and I think I think the city of Medford was even an override. So I think we can do that here too. I'm glad, Blythe, you pointed out the $1 million, what the $1 million to the average taxpayer is per house. That puts it into really sound understanding so people can do it. So, I'm confident we can work through this. I teach at Massasoit Community College. I teach public speaking. When I have a class size of 20, I can do way more with my students. When I have a class size of 28, like I have right now, by the time I get through all the 3 speeches and the stuff that needs to be done during the semester, there's not a lot of time for teaching. Okay, I can spend way more time with a smaller class. And the lower grades, I was lucky enough. I had a son that went to a brand new Plouffe pre-K in Brockton. Okay, but he had to do a lottery to get in there. So there's all sorts of considerations and ramifications. I think if we educate people properly, and it's kind of hard to do when you don't have a local newspaper, okay? We do have a wonderful cable station that we can use. Not everybody has cable, but the cable station puts it on Facebook and on other sorts of media and stuff like that, and we can come up with a great communications plan and get the word out. So I'm looking to be more educated. I hope we don't have to even look at 30% across the board cuts, because I can't look at some of those smaller budgets in the face if we do that. I'm not a fan of across the board budget cuts because I think some people it destroys that part of the budget and others it doesn't. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy.
Mr. Lindy, could I respond to Mr. Lindy?
Please go right ahead, sure.
The only way we can all be successful in this outcome and moving forward through the budget season is to do exactly what you said. We have to be radically honest, radically open, and radically transparent to everybody in our 2 communities to educate, as you said, to educate them about what this means, what this level of funding means, what this level of funding means, and what this level of funding means. And that's the best we can do. And then we need to rely, and I have relied on the people of Bridgewater and Raynham for almost 30 years now to make the right decisions for their towns. And guess what? They usually do. Proof, you're elected. No, I'm just kidding about that.
Well, being on a regional school committee gave me a real knowledge for how the economies of scale and budgets can work on a regional basis. All Massachusetts, 351 cities and towns, every town and city for themselves. But sometimes you got to do things together to make it stronger. We have 2 communities. You've had a lot more years than I have, Tim. You were on BR school committee before?
Years ago.
And then the council, and now I think right place, right time, right experience. I think we can get this done.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be straight and to the point, just really quick. I don't have a lot of personal stories to share, but to me, I think, this is my 2nd year on the council. This is my 2nd year having this conversation about the gap, and I think that we can sit here and talk about all our options as much as possible, but we need to start moving with these options, right? So I met with the town manager today at 5 p.m. I've asked her if she could help educate us here on the council of what it would look like if we went the debt exclusion or override, because I think we need to understand first what that impact is so that we can share it with the community and then educate the community, as others have mentioned too. But look, we can't just keep talking about it. We got to start moving here because there is a glaring need, and I think that's evident here in the room. And so I will continue to push for that, and I will continue to push for it as quickly as possible, but in a way in which we can educate each other and make a sound and wise decision. So with that being said, I do have a few pointed questions I'd just like to ask, and you could probably guess what my first question is going to be on, but it revolves around class size. And Mr. Powers and I had a chance to meet last week one-on-one where I could educate and learn a little bit more about the system. And I would just like to ask Mr. Powers, do you have an average class size right now for the K through 8?
So when we look at average class size is approximately 28 on the 28 on the Bridgewater side, 26 on the Raynham side.
And that's just K through 8?
That's just K through 8, yes.
Excellent. And we have how many schools in the K through 8?
8 schools and 7 school buildings.
And so my understanding, just based on your numbers, is I think you had 14 positions that were dedicated to class reduction.
At the K to 8 level, yes.
At the K to 8.
Yes.
If there are 7 buildings and 14 positions, on average, that's 2 positions per school. Just simple math to me doesn't add up on how that would get the number down to mid-20s, as you described.
Right. So as I shared, bringing back some of those 24 positions that we lost would address class size initially. So for example, when we look at kindergarten in Raynham, we'll use that as an example. It's a very, very low class size right now. They're averaging about 21. So obviously that small group is moving up to first grade. If we were able to return one of the first grade positions at the first grade level in Raynham at Merrill that we lost, that would allow us to have 21 in first grade. We wouldn't then need to use one of those 14 positions in first grade at Merrill because we would already have a low class size. And so when we look at, across the board, there are some bubbles that are lower, so even the grade moving up may, at a higher grade may be at 25. We wouldn't necessarily use one of those positions, say at the middle school level if it's a 25, to lower class size. We would say, okay, it could be 7th, 8th grade, 25 students in a class. Again, we'd love to have less, but we could work with that, and so we wouldn't use one of those 14 positions. I will say, when I look at, again, projecting right now, a significant amount of those positions would go to the Bridgewater side, again, to try to lower our class size. I mean, obviously, if it's 28 across the board, K to 8, we have some significant work to do. Again, we didn't fill all of our positions on the Bridgewater side last year that had retired, and so by bringing those positions back, it'll initially help with class size, and so instead of having to maybe, have 2, 3 teachers at a particular grade level, we may only need to have 2 of those 14 at a particular grade level, if that makes sense.
Are all 24 of those positions that you're bringing back or would bring back class reduction?
No, so all of those 24 positions were not classroom positions.
Why not focus on that first?
Right, and so we're really looking at the, when I say bringing back, I should say bring back the equivalent of those 24 positions.
Yeah.
And so not all of the 24 positions that we lost would be brought back as they currently were. We would certainly look and reevaluate and say, okay, we may have been able to get away without filling this position, and it's not a need. We've been able to operate without it. But we know then, to your point, that we could use one of those 24 positions potentially as a class size reduction position versus, in a different department.
And Mr. Murphy, if I may, and I appreciate your focus on class size, but let's also remember we have a significant and actually growing, as Ms. King said, special needs, people who need help, community in our district. And we have to make sure we're compliant with all of the state laws, the right staffing levels, et cetera there. So it's not just as easy as saying, okay, take this money, put it in the classroom, because if you do that, maybe you're out of compliance over here or whatever, So it's, as I said last night at our budget committee, it's a juggling act. There's a whole bunch of balls in the air. But I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Yeah, no,
I'm not arguing. I'm just.
I know. I appreciate that. And I think my question would be, Mr. Powers mentioned that there were 2 admin roles in a budget analysis. Why are those even on the table if we have class sizes of 33? Is my question.
Yeah, no, and that's a, legitimate question, 100%. And I think, again, when we get down to it and know what our final number is, we're going to have to prioritize. I think, certainly as Mr. Fitzgibbon said, any type of legal requirement that we have to meet, that's going to be the priority. And then we have to, from there, look and say, okay, this is what we have for funding, so this is what we can afford for positions, and try to meet the needs of the district. I think, to your point, certainly as much as they're needed, we would not prioritize 1 and 2, those 2 administrative positions, when we start to call back, if we're able to return some of those positions. But yes, I think when we can and opportunities exist, we're 100% going to do what we can to lower class size as much as possible, while also balancing kind of some of those other poles and responsibilities that we have to fulfill.
And it would be the same for the high school, as you mentioned. There was how many teachers there at the high school that were in the
14 additional teachers at the high school. So again, looking at some of those positions, whether they be in student services or special education, but also in some of the core classes, looking to see if we can fulfill some positions that haven't been filled because of retirements. Again, looking at some of those core classes that are 30 plus. Again, it's January or February now, so I can't have a definitive answer for you. But what I can tell you is, I certainly would probably more than likely prioritize, having 28 at the high school. I think we could, get by with, versus 28 at the elementary level. But again, we have to, as we get closer to the spring and really have a better understanding of what our enrollment's going to be, to know 100% for sure where those positions are going to play out.
And you said there was 50 students added since October 1st. Do you know where roughly they fall in terms of K through 12? Is there like a higher percentage towards a certain grade?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers with me tonight, but I can certainly get them and follow up with you.
What about historically? Have you seen anything trending?
I think it really spans, the K to 12. I think, for us, it really, when we kind of look at some of our schools, obviously enrollment is increasing. We do have a few schools where, when you look at enrollment over the last couple of years, it has decreased. But I think for us, overall, it spans the grade levels when we have new students move in.
And if I may add, Mr. Murphy,
yeah,
I'm worried about the next year or two, because of what happened 5 years ago. We're going to be adding kindergartners and first graders because the pandemic and people stayed home. So that's very important. And then just to your point otherwise about, an admin staff or whatever, I am happy to meet with any counselor here, one-on-one, in a group, whatever, and we can walk through the budget line item by line item, and you can tell me what you think is right, what you think is wrong, where we need more, where we need less, and I can bring that back to the superintendent, to the chair of the committee, and say, here's what these folks' thoughts are. We're not the smartest people in the room. I'd say you guys are, but that's because you're hosting us tonight. But you hear from everybody, we hear from everybody, and we're trying to build the best budget possible. So
can I ask Mr. Fitzgibbons, can you do that for class sizes? Could you get a list of class sizes and we could sit down and look at them?
I'm sure we can get anything we need, and right down to the teacher's name, probably. Even though
I don't want
wanna
that.
out them, but
All right, shifting gears.
Ms. King.
Oh, sorry, Ms. King.
I just want to add on to that. We're open to, this has been some really great feedback so far, and we're open to that. And Mr. Powers' budget is really reflective of feedback from his staff, community members, students. He's polled, high school kids. How do you feel about certain things? How would you feel about class size, the classes that you've taken to get this far? So he's had multiple meetings until he presented that budget to get feedback from all areas of the school system and students and community members, and we definitely want to hear from you as well. Some of these, yes, we will have to prioritize, and class size and special education, those high needs that we have right now will get top priority. But this is a budget to be at our maximum capacity. This is what we need. So yes, they're all negotiable at some point, and I think he did a great job of looking school by school to see how can we max out this school with classroom teachers, interventionists to help those students that have extra needs, maybe education support professionals, just to give that second set of hands. A couple of years ago when we had the funds, we added an ESP in every kindergarten class on both sides, because we saw class sizes are getting high, and if we can't afford a teacher, we can give that second set of hands in those foundation kindergarten classes. And we've gotten good feedback from the teachers that if I can't get lower class size, this is helpful. It's not ideal, especially at those learning to read grades, but you know, we looked at it that this could make an impact, and we think it has. So ideas like that, we're trying to do the best that we can at each school. Like, how can we maximize everything?
I'll be quick.
Yeah.
I understand Bridgewater has school choice. Do we know any numbers on how many students participate in school choice?
I can get those for you. The last couple of years, well, I should say, historically, we've only allowed school choice at the high school level. We have not had school choice at the K-8 level. The last couple of years, we've limited the enrollment to only 9th grade. And so that has shrunk our numbers a little bit in school choice. Obviously, as those numbers go down, as does the funding. But we felt as though that by starting in 9th grade, what was happening is we were getting students moving in and out. You know, they may be, for whatever reason, going from district to district. And so we might have a student that applies for school choice as a senior. In some cases, they've already been at 3 other high schools. It just wasn't necessarily a positive experience for everyone, and so we felt as though, all right, let's limit this to 9th grade. Those students will be here with us for 4 years. They become part of our community. They're more invested in being part of the school community. So right now, we have limited it to just 9th grade.
What about students going out?
Again, I can get those numbers for you. I think when we look at enrollment at the high school, it certainly is not reflective of every 8th grader moving up to the high school. And so we do lose students, to BP, to Southeastern Regional, to Bristol Aggie, and we do lose some students on school choice. I think for every student we lose, I think we'd look on paper and say there's a student coming in.
Do you know why? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
Do you know
no,
why you lose those students? Do you ask why?
We do. We certainly look into it. And so I think first and foremost, when we look at students going to, say, the vocational technical high schools, those are amazing, and we just are not set up to offer those programming, that programming. And so when students apply to go to there, we talk to them like, hey, what are you thinking about studying? And in some cases, it's automotive, or it could be computer science. Again, both programs that we're just not currently set up for. So no fault. We completely understand why those students are making that choice and fully support it. We always, pay special attention to those students that are leaving us to go to other public districts. Again, we have students that will go to Cardinal Spellman or Bishop Fian, Coyle Cassidy when it was open. Again, they may have a, family tie. Their parents may have, gone through those schools. But when we do look at the students that are leaving us to go to other public high schools. And, it varies. For some students, it comes down to athletics. They feel as though that they may have a better opportunity at a smaller high school. It could come down to class size. They may have a family member or relative or a friend in another community, and they hear from those parents that, oh, our class size is low 20s, or at the high school level, it's mid 20s, and sometimes that's the draw. I know at one point before we were offering a one-to-one device program for our students, we were losing some students to neighboring districts because that's enticing, right? To a student, you get a device, and you're learning digitally, and so that was also a draw. And then there are opportunities that exist where students have just not had a great experience, and they decide to go to another district. But those are definitely things that we look into more, because we're never. I use this term loosely, going out to recruit. But we know, yes, our students are coming to our high school by default, But when they have a choice to go somewhere else, we have to look at that. And so we really, the high school principal and her staff have really taken a look at that the last couple of years. When our 8th grade students are welcomed up at the high school, they're trying to prepare like promotional videos for the high school, all of the offerings that we have, all the electives, the clubs, the extracurriculars. Because I think when it comes down to it, short of some of the electives that other high schools offer that we don't, we have just as successful students coming out of Bridgewater-Raynham that some of these other communities. Sometimes I think, to no fault of anyone's, you just hear about another community, you hear about their school system, so you assume it must be better. I can think of a few students just knowing those families that they've left us to go to other public schools, and then they're back within a year or two because their experience there wasn't what they thought it was going to be. And now they're having, good experiences back at Bridgewater-Raynham.
Awesome. All right, I'm just going to end with one final ask, Councilor Perry, because I think this is important. I think as we go through and around, I think there's an understanding that folks would like to be educated about what our options are on the council. And I don't want to speak for other folks, but that's me. I would like to know how we can move this forward. What are our options? I want to understand the big picture, talk to the town manager about that. One of the counterparts to that is I would like to formally ask that the Raynham Select Committee come together with us and do a workshop so that we can hear from them that they're willing to make the same commitment to at least educate themselves on what our options are. Because as a district, I think we have the right to know where they stand too. So I think we need to find a way to formally get together with them, and it needs to be, not a year from now, but relatively soon, so we can direct this thing in the right direction. So that would be my ask of the council. We can figure that out, how we do that, but I think it's a necessary step. And then I just want to thank all the parents, the kids, everybody that came out, the people that are online watching because they can't be here because they have kids. I hear you. You can reach out to us at any point. So I just want to thank folks for being here for that too.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. Chase.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could, I'd like to direct a question to our acting town manager. Blythe, you had made reference to two figures some time ago, the $1,000 figure and the $100 figure. And I was just hoping to benefit from a little more clarity, maybe a bit more granularity on the distinction, realizing that those are very broad generalizations, and it's very early in the process. But what I recall, if I understood correctly, is that the $1,000 figure that you made reference to was an estimated per taxpayer impact, bottom line impact, through an override mechanism. And I'm less certain as to how the $100 figure was derived. And
so our awesome finance director did some research for me today on the state's Division of Local Services website, which is it was a wonderful tool to be able to pull data about every community and finances. And so knowing that the average tax bill for the house valued at $593, an average house value in Bridgewater is $593,000. And so we looked at every assessed value between $250,000 and $1,550,000. And what we learned was for that average house, the tax bill, if you were to have an override and ask the voters to approve $5 million more, so right now half of what the school's asking for, that would cost that family, that house, about $500, a little bit more. So dividing it by 5, $1 million ask is about $100, a little bit more. So if you were asking for $10 million, $100 a house, that's where you come up with $1,000, $1,100.
Dr. Perry, could I follow up on that just to be clear?
Sorry, were you all set with your description there?
I'm sorry?
Were you all set with your description? As far as, I just didn't want to cut you off.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
If you were done
It
clarifying.
sounded like you'd
I mean, I think there's also other factors that go into play when you're going to decide where we're going to head. What economic development opportunities may come along that can help balance the tax increase? What changes might we consider on the town side? I think we haven't had the chance to give you a full picture yet, as the school has done, as to what the town's needs what we haven't been funding, and we should do too. I'm not trying to complicate the conversation, but I think it's fair for everyone to understand what it all means, because there's certain things that are important to people. Schools are, but also some of the other services that we offer too are. So having that full conversation, I think, is terrific. And I would,
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yeah, just to follow up, because I believe the town manager has presented you with the preliminary budget, which within the current revenue structure, Ms. Robinson, correct me if I'm wrong, would allow like a $1 to $1.2 million increase to the school district. So a $10 million increase really only becomes slightly less than 9.
that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make that clear. It wasn't like we have to cover it all somewhere else. We've got some built in.
No, sir, totally
Not
understand.
quite enough for our liking.
Get another
but-
9. Not a problem. You all set with your question, Mr. Chase?
Thank you, yes.
Let me just finish up with any other councilors. Do you have any questions that you want to bring up?
Yes, I do. Now, we have obviously got a situation where we have a $9 million deficit. I would hark back to Brockton's example from many years ago. And Brockton was in a situation where it was put in a box and couldn't deal with the situation for its students. Brockton sued the state of Massachusetts, saying that there was not equity in the school system. In other words, a town like Lexington has ample tax revenues, whereas a town like Bridgewater, which is more middle, and has students coming into it all the time, has more of a difficult situation. I would argue that we need to assert ourselves, speak up for ourselves, and rather than put it on the taxpayers, including the elderly who are on fixed incomes, we ought to be going forward to the state and saying, hey, put up, get the money for us. We are in a difficult situation. The equity of it means that more money has to come to us. Now, what argument could we use? We happen to have 2 state facilities within the boundaries of our town. They are 2 islands of state land in our town. They use some of our amenities, like our water. For example, the college uses our water. Those students take a lot of showers, I hear. Anyway, we should take the position, I believe, that the state pilot money, payments in lieu of taxes, those pilot monies need to be increased to the amount of $9 million that we need. I would be interested to find out what people would think about taking our case to the state rather than laying down and paying out more of our own money on an override. So I'd be interested to hear from the public on that. I'd be interested to hear about the rest of the council, what they think of such a thing. I am of the opinion that we should stand up for ourselves and ask for more money from the state. And that's my position, because I am not looking to cut police or fire. If the library gets cut, it will no longer be accredited, which means we will no longer be able to get books from one library to another in the ABLE system, the sales system, ABLE system. All of these things are unacceptable. So then the question is, will the town be brave enough? Will we be brave enough to stand up for ourselves? That's my comment.
Ms., could I just
Yeah, go
address
ahead.
Ms. Ellenberg? Any way we can do it, we're in favor of on the school committee, I believe. So we'll be behind you on that one. But I do want to add one thing to your analysis of what the state does to the town of Bridgewater. 7 grade crossings across roads in our town for the MBTA, which slows response time for our first responders to get different places. So again, another reason to put in your quiver when you go to the state.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Larry, did you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I'll try to be quick. Mr. Murphy was talking about other schools and out-of-district costs, and I'm looking at the programs with other schools, and there's an over 45% increase from FY25 to 26, almost $2 million. So can you speak to what's driving that cost?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, some of that cost is being driven by those unforeseen students moving into the district. So again, as I stated, we always try to build in some contingencies going into each fiscal year that we may have some students during the fiscal year go out of district. And so when we look at that cost as well, it's factoring in some of the students that have moved into the district this year that we hadn't accounted for or planned for, and now building them into the budget for next year. Unfortunately, some of those, as I mentioned earlier, are residential placements, and so those costs are quite significant. We typically, the state gives us a projection every year to use for special education programming in out of districts, and so with the public collaborative programs, other public day programs, and this year it's set at 5%. So right off the top, we increase our tuitions by 5% for those that are fall in that category, and then obviously work with the other placements. Obviously we're signing placement contracts with them for that school year, and we look to, if the student is going to stay there, what the rates would be for the following year, and then obviously try to factor that into the budget. So really that's such, as much as we try to predict that number, sometimes it's very difficult to do just because of the number of students moving in. I don't have the number in front of me, but I want to say this year, I think we had 7 students move into the district since the start of the year that we just hadn't planned for.
Understood. Can I do one more?
Yeah, please go right ahead.
$2.3 million increase in transportation. Can you also speak to that?
Sure. So again, looking at our contract with Lucini Bus, who provides our transportation both in district and out of district. We have a contractual increase every year of our contract, so it factors in that. And then we also look at other costs that are driving it. So as I mentioned, part of that is the special education costs. So when these students are placed in out-of-district placements, it could be upwards of $100,000 to transport them. Obviously, when we're doing our budget, especially for some of those unknowns, we always try to factor in that potential number because we never want to be short in that category. The other thing that we've looked at is just our regular transportation and increasing the cost there as we're having more students move into the district. Obviously, we have to transport them. And so looking at the potential, I know going into this school year, the Lucini bus company, Ms. Lucini, they were looking at potentially adding an additional bus. Thankfully, they were able to reroute some of the routes and accommodate that. But we're just afraid now that we're already, looking at being plus 100 over last year. And with the new potential move-ins, we may have to add a bus or potentially 2 going forward. Again, didn't want to be put in a situation where, we didn't budget for those potential costs.
Understood. Thank you.
If I can add to that, on the town side of the budget, we also, if you noticed in the sources and uses, we have almost $300,000 budgeted to transport students to Bristol Agricultural.
Bristol Aggie.
Thank you. and Norfolk County Aggie.
Is that an additional to the 2.3 million?
Exactly, that's why I'm telling you.
Yes. Yeah, that responsibility, the way it
Yeah.
works for the agricultural schools, it falls on the responsibility of the town. And we have certainly tried to work together over the years.
I'll send you the bill.
Yes, well, that's how we've tried to work together, right? I'll give it back. Looking at, are there other districts in the area that might be going up to some of those schools, especially if you're in an out-of-county school, and, a student decides to go to, Norfolk Aggie or for Bridgewater, Bristol Aggie. there have been years where Lucini has been able to kind of manage that. They may have a bus going through the towns that they can drop them off at the bus stop. Unfortunately, it just hasn't worked the last couple of years, but it's certainly something that we always try to work together and to see if we can accomplish. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Loretti. So I do want to hear from Finance, and MJ, you had a couple of comments and questions.
Yes, Mr. President. Actually, I'd like to note right now at this moment, 7:26 p.m. on Tuesday the 4th, we are calling our committee to order with our minimum quorum. I just acknowledged that one of our members, Mr. Knoll, had just entered the room a few minutes ago. So before I start, first and foremost, I would like to apologize for the lateness of our calling to order. I take full responsibility for that and will make sure that my membership are a little bit more at ease in attending going forward. So I will begin my statement as thus. Mr. President, Superintendent Powers, Chairman Fitzgibbons, residents in attendance, good evening. My name is Michaela Spagone, and I am the chairwoman of the Bridgewater Finance Committee. Tonight, as you have heard, is the start of the fiscal year 2026 budget process for the town of Bridgewater and the Bridgewater-Raynham School District. This annual process seeks to build a consensus on the budgetary and spending needs of our community and our school system. In this year, we face various economic and financial challenges. Challenges made more difficult by inflationary pressures and uncertainty over funding from state and federal sources. It is in this time that the Finance Committee will work vigorously with the Town Council and to advise and consent to a budget that is fiscally responsible and carefully measured in addressing both our short and long-term needs for the town of Bridgewater and the Bridgewater-Raynham School District. Make no mistake, this is a many-layered process. What the public does not often see is the work done and conversations had by our public officials behind the scenes to make the budget process manageable. At this time, I thank and acknowledge the Town Council, town officials, and the school committee and the superintendent of schools for remaining committed to the needs of our fellow residents and their children. Bridgewater and Bridgewater-Raynham Regional School District are both resilient governmental entities. How we respond in this moment will be our guiding principle into fiscal year 2026 and in the coming years. And with that, Mr. President, I would like to fully state fulsomely that the Finance Committee will stand and work with the Town of Bridgewater's Council and the school district where we are allowed to.
Thank you, MJ. I appreciate that. So again, we've heard from all the councils. I'm going to, finish up the comments so we can wrap this up and get to our town council meeting. So I do again want to thank you all for coming. Couple of things. Going back to what Ms. McGrath said, I would strongly urge, if we haven't maximized our relationship with BSU, with student teachers and things of that nature, to do so. Again, it's in our backyard. It's obviously the best teaching school in the Commonwealth. Take advantage of our resources that we have here to as much of a advantage as we can. Secondarily, my question is for fiscal year 26, I don't know if you know offhand, do you have a projection of if there's any teachers retiring, how many teachers might be retiring that fiscal year? And then, again, with the fact that those are probably on the higher end of the pay scale, can we replace them almost with 2 teachers for 1 retiree? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So that's something, that information is being gathered by our Human Resources Department right now to analyze. We know of a few teachers that have already put in for retirement for the end of this year, and that's certainly something that we, look to. One, can we replace that position? And, typically it is replaced by an individual at a much lower salary. Some of our faculty that have been here their entire career, could be obviously at the top of the salary scale, and so that could be a significant, $40,000, $50,000 difference in some case, depending on where that new person comes in. But we definitely factor in, that attrition money, and retirement breakage in terms of savings as well.
Sure. Is it possible,
Dr. Perry? It's probably more like 4 to 3. So if 3 folks at the top end leave, we can get 4. It's not
a 2 to 1 ratio.
No,
That'd be nice.
It would be nice, absolutely. But
yeah. No, totally understand. Again, just throwing that out there. Ultimately, again, you've heard from all the counselors, I'm born and raised in Bridgewater, BR grad as well. If I could write you a check right now for it, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And for all the parents here, again, I feel for all of you. My kids have gone through the system. They've graduated through. They've done a great job going through the school system, and I hope the children continue to do so. Obviously, we're in a situation where, number one, we're in the process of finding a new town manager. So hopefully that's going to happen within the next few months. Time frame wise, between now and the next election cycle, really, really tight schedule. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to put something like this together. In fact, I don't think we have enough time. I think we are looking at, obviously, we need to talk with Raynham, and I think both towns potentially are looking at some sort of override down the line to fill the needs of what we have for both towns. But this has to be done in a logical manner. We have to have, as Councilor Murphy mentioned, meetings with the selectmen there, come up with a plan to educate every member of every town. As we know, Raynham had a tough time passing some debt exclusions over there. And we could be in line and do what we want to do in Bridgewater, but if it's not in line with what's happening in Raynham, that's a problem. So again, just to be a realist, for fiscal year 26, it might be very difficult to meet your request. I think, again, I'd like to see, and I'm sure you guys have worked on it, with what we're projecting, with what Raynham's projecting, with what the state's projecting, what does that give us? What do we not get with that, and get that on paper so we know what that looks like. But I think if we work toward a plan for fiscal year 27, if we can't get it done in 26, I think if we take the steps over the next year to work toward even an even better plan for 27, and I know for the town of Bridgewater, it involves the schools, it involves police and fire, it involves infrastructure, that if we're going to present a number to the town that we can stand behind, that's going to cover most entities, then I think that's what we need to do as a town. Right now, as she mentioned, $100 per million. Right now, if you looked at a $10 million override, it's that's $1,000 for everyone's tax bill. So that takes some education. That takes time to put out there. And again, I think our time frame is really tight for this one. I don't know, as mentioned, debt exclusions. I don't think debt exclusions are great for operational expenses. It's more for tangible physical things. So I don't know if that's a great option, but. Again, I think the conversation still needs to take place. More investigating needs to happen, and then obviously the rest of the council, including myself, are certainly engaged in that, and to see what we can do for fiscal year 26. But again, I do see down the line. I think fiscal year 27 would be even in better situation to kind of project for, as far as funding goes. But again, we'll see what we can do for 26.
Mr. Chairman, I
yes.
have another question. Yes. I forgot this question earlier. The ESP positions that were mentioned earlier, could those be filled by volunteers who do the tax abatements up at the town hall? Seniors, for example, who could be in K through 3, have that extra adult in the school classroom. Is that permissible, or do union matters preclude that?
So I think we certainly have volunteers in classes now, but not in a full-time role. I think that could potentially be a conflict there, as you mentioned with our unions. But certainly something, again, I think you've already mentioned it, and Mr. Fitzgibbons has echoed it. We have to look at all potential options that may be out there, and some may come to fruition and some might not, but it's certainly something that we can, take a look at.
Have you been actively seeking volunteers?
So we haven't been actively seeking, more so at our lower grade levels. Our elementary schools, they have a very, very active parent-teacher organization. And so a lot of parents in those organizations, the Mitchell, the Williams, as they go up in grades, and then on the Raynham side, Maryland La Liberty, certainly have a very active parent organization. So a lot of volunteers at more so at the lower grades, but not always just necessarily volunteering in the classroom, volunteering at the schools in other creative ways as well.
Or extracurricular matters, yes. In other words, not within the classroom itself.
Not always.
All right. So again, for the sake of time, and obviously we got to get our town council meeting going, I want to thank Mr. Powers and the entire committee for coming and joining us. Appreciate the dialogue. It's really what needs to happen. Have you met with Raynham yet, or is that coming up?
No, we're in the process of scheduling a meeting with them.
Okay.
Yes.
So obviously we'll see how the conversation with them goes, and again, keep the lines of communication open, see what we can do and between the both towns, and go from there. But I, again, sincerely thank you guys for coming and
thank you,
sharing everything with us.
We certainly appreciate it. And the more you hear, the more we hear from everybody, the better off we all are. So I'll make a motion to adjourn the budget subcommittee.
Yeah. And I'll make a motion to adjourn our town council meeting with them. Do I hear a motion
Second.
for that? Motion second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are in adjournment from this meeting.
And I look for a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee's part of the joint meeting. Seconded. Do I hear a second? Second. All seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'll be taking a little 5 to 10 minute break to get set up for our council meeting before we get started.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, looking forward to it.